Hello, everybody. This is Sean, the household gamer, with Marker Monday, where we create markers that we're going to use for strategies and schemes and various crews. Today, we are going to build strategy markers for a strategy that we play 25% of the time, Corrupted Ley Lines. Now, for this, we are going to need 5 strategy markers that are height 5, blocking, and impassable. I've used just 30mm tokens, but these are height 5, and they need to be big. You need to hide your models behind. If you don't have something you can visualize hiding behind, what's the points? So for this project, you're going to need a 3/4 inch dowel. That's a couple of bucks at Home Depot. Some masking tape, a saw, some files, particularly a round file, small round file. You're going to need some 30mm bases, some sandpaper, utility knife, a hot glue gun, and a little bit of foliage. You can get this from Michael's or Joann's. It's $1.39 a sprig, and I'm going to use this for a whole bunch of different projects. So the first thing you want to do is mark your dowel. You're going to be cutting these dowels at 5 inches, and you're also going to be setting grooves in them at intervals of 1 inch. So in order to mark your dowel, you're going to measure it out, and then in order to get a nice straight line around it that you can saw, you're going to wrap some tape around the dowel right at the mark, and you're going to draw a line around the tape. Then you can remove the tape, and there's your line for sawing. I'm using 2-inch wide masking tape, which means that I can mark 2 spaces at a time, draw one around one end of the masking tape, one around the other. Keeps it kind of easy. Then you want to saw through. I use my hacksaw. I like to put it in my vise. If you don't have a vise, that's okay. You can hold it on the end of something sturdy, your table or whatever. Make sure you put something under it to catch all the sawdust because it kind of makes a mess. And what I do is I start to saw around on all sides following that line and basically saw my way through until there's nothing left but a little bit in the center. And then you can either saw the whole way through or break it off. And then you want to sand the end, especially if you broke it off. You want to sand around the corners, make them a little bit smoother, take away any slivers or whatever. Then you're going to go around, and with marks at every inch, what you're going to do is take your saw and just lightly saw around every one of those 1-inch marks. Just put a little bit of a groove in there. Go all the way around on each one of them, and then take your round file and file that line that you cut with the saw. This will help your file stay in that groove so it doesn't go all over the place, and you get a nice even line, like a mortar line between these stones all the way around the stick. Do that on every single one of those groove lines. And then go through and gouge it and distress it. You can draw cracks, and you can do it with a knife. You can do it with the end of your file. You can do it with anything that's pokey. This is wood. You can gouge it. You can distress it. Put some chips up around the top. Draw some cracks and kind of follow it out. You can use your file to buff it up. Do whatever you want. Make these a little bit weathered. Make it look less like a 3/4 inch dowel and more like some ancient stones that have been sitting around. The more 3D impressions and gouges you put in, the easier they're going to be able to paint. When you dry brush it, those cracks are just going to stand right out. Once your pillar is all distressed and cracked and gouged, you are going to hot glue it to the 30mm base. I like to draw a little bead of hot glue around, stick it on, and then twist it to smear the hot glue around so it's not just this big thick bead so it gets all over the place. That sets up instantly. And these things stand up pretty well on their own. I was worried they were going to be top heavy and fall over like bowling pins, but they're okay. And then you're going to attach the vines. This is the best. This I thought was the best part. You're going to cut one of the edges of these little foliages off and start at the bottom, put a little hot glue and get it in there. And then what I like to do is put hot glue actually on the branches itself rather than on the column. And when you press the foliage up against it, lick your thumb and press it up against it. It's going to save you from the hot glue, and it smears the hot glue out, and it makes it cool almost instantly. It's kind of gross. You're getting spit all over it, but who cares? It's your spit. So hot glue it, lick your thumb and press it, and it just instantly, you don't have hot glue blobs. You don't get strings or anything. You just mash it right in there, and then that foliage is not going anywhere. Then it's time to spray paint. For primer, black Rust-Oleum. It takes a while to set up. It's tacky for a while, but it's cheap. And it works. Okay, it's time to paint. I'm going to mix up a gray. With gray, use a lot of white and a little bit of black. A little bit of black goes a long way. So mix yourself up a gray and then get your brush nice and wet. you want this paint to be pretty thin. It is going to go on looking bright, and it is going to dry dark over that black undercoat. So I'm just taking my brush and getting it saturated with some wet paint and then wiping almost all of it off on a paper towel. And I'm going to go back to this paper towel to get the dry brush paint. I'm not going to go back into the well of paint hardly at all. I want you to go around the outside of this pillar, and whenever you encounter a crack, I want you to brush perpendicular, so you sort of ride over the crack. If you're doing the big mortar lines that we filed out, brush up and down. If we're doing the cracks that you etched in with your pen or your knife or your file, I want you to go perpendicular to them. And I want you to pick out the vines. So really get gray all over this and be sloppy. This is not anything. If you put gray paint in where black lines want to be, that's fine. We are going back in. Just slap this paint all over. Get one layer of gray on it. Then we're going to go back in with the black. We're really going to water that black down. I want it the consistency of milk. And we're going to go in with our finer brush, and we're going to line black in between each of the individual stones. In order to do that, you can put your brush there and then just turn the column, and it'll just go right through that groove. I want you to put a little bit of black around the outside of the vines so they stick out. I want you to go in and line any of the cracks that you may have accidentally put gray in when you dry brush, draw them out. And since this black is so light, if you put black where you don't want it, that's fine. You're going to mostly see through it. You're going to put a couple of layers of this really milky paint in there, and eventually the part that you want really black is going to stand out. But don't use thick paint. Use thin paint. I can't emphasize that enough. After you do your black lining, you're going to go back in and start highlighting. You mix up a bit of lighter gray, and you're going to go around the tops of the columns. Do it again with a thin paint. Put a lot of water in there. You do a couple of coats. It's so thin that if you make a mistake, you can sop it right up with the brush. When applying color onto something that's basically black and white, I like to really thin it down and then apply it over something that I've highlighted, and it's really just kind of tinting it. The shading's already done. Putting in that dark gray and black underneath the leaves makes this pop. And you really can afford to have your paint very watery and apply this just kind of sloppy. And if it gets on the stone, that's no big deal, because it kind of looks, put a little on there, it kind of looks like moss anyway. It's so thin. It's just this like stain. But it makes it super easy to pick out details like this. And then you'll go back in and do another coat, and you can put more green on the underside, like along the underside of this one, since that's where the shadow is. So that green's going to be deeper. And it's a super easy way to get just really dynamic looking highlights and lowlights. And then when you're highlighting the cracks, pick a side. If the cracks are vertical, pick a side and do that as though the light is cast. Don't put a highlight here and here. Just put one right there. And in other cases, like here, you want to switch to this side because the sun is coming down from on top, so that's where it's going to cast. See how thick these thick black lines I made are now turning into little skinny petite black lines because I'm putting the contrast next to them. God, that's so satisfying. The very last step is where the magic happens. That was a huge fat highlight, but hey, you know what? I don't even care. It's going to look nice on the tabletop. All right, and then we do even a larger highlight and around the tip of the top. For me, a miniature's done when you finally take your black paint and like carefully go around the base. There used to be this commercial they would play all the time for the authentic Civil War chess set. And each piece was hand painted, and by hand painted they mean the bases of these pewter pieces were, painted one color. But I loved watching the paintbrush glide along the side of those Civil War guys in the blue and the gray. A couple of little weathering tips you can do. Here's one. You take a dot of really, really black paint, get it in there nice and black, and then let that dry, obviously, but get some much, much lighter paint. Put it right underneath. Makes a little ridge. Looks like a little divot. Another thing you can do is get your goosiest brush. Put a little color on there, a little black maybe, kind of pop, and then just sort of stipple it Give a little flex. Bro, I'm not even flexing. There's one last little step. That one little line step takes it from drab to fab, right? All right, you with me? Let me hear a drab to fab. So those are the 5 strategy markers for corrupted ley lines. As far as the lodestone, we call it the football. That never makes an appearance on the field. You can make something if you want, but we usually take like pencil eraser or whatever and pass it around. Maybe I'll make one of those someday, but whatever it is, I think it should probably look like a football. That's how we envision this strategy. It's football. Anyway, thanks for watching. This is the Household Gamer. Please like and subscribe and pass around the word. We aim to have a lunch break battle report every Friday. Try and do marker Mondays. What's in the box? Wednesdays. And more fun, as much as we can make. So stay safe out there. Be cool. Thanks for watching.